your students, you've been there a long time, haven't you?
Yeah, unfortunately. Or fortunately, depending on how you look at it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I want to introduce Jastrzembski. He used to be actually with the DNR Forest Service as a forester, project forester, right?
Yes.
But for more years he's been teaching with the forestry program at Allegany City College. And there's a lot of foresters out of that city program going on for the forestry group. He's also a part-time consulting forester listed in the consulting forestry directory. And if you come down here, he could talk to us about sustainable forestry practices. And
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. I did ask Jonathan to take a picture of me with my this slide up so my boss sees that I'm working today. So, and this is being recorded, right? So we could edit that out.
that is the idea. Say
Cheese. How's that for stage? You got it, right? Thank you. All right. Jonathan and I go way back, probably to the mid-1980s. And he called me in August and asked me if I'd come and help with this. And I said, sure, anything to get me out of the office is a good day. I have 2 vacation days a week. Those are days that I'm with my students and we're out in the woods. And the rest of you probably can appreciate what it's like sitting in front of a computer doing bureaucracy or paperwork the rest of the time. So I am really excited to be here, and I appreciate the friendship I've got with Jonathan and the ability to come here and just talk to you today. Jonathan mentioned that I do consult, although I'm not here to sell you. Okay, that's not why I am here. I am here to help work with you and to help you become a better steward of your land. I've got kind of an interesting background in that while I do teach, I'm involved in a lot of other opportunities. I serve on a scholarship board giving away almost $500,000 worth of money a year to forestry and arboriculture students. I've served on Maryland's Rural Legacy Board for the governor. I just got removed from, or my tenure ended on that one. And I do serve on a corporation in Maryland. Maryland owns 3 corporations that are economic development corporations. One of them is called Marbidco. It's the Maryland Agriculture and Resource-Based Industrial Development Corporation. I did not name it. But they look at setting up businesses and help leverage funding. We do that. We try to package deals so anybody at all interested in economic development of natural resources can apply for low-income or leveraged funding through this organization. It's a really good gig. I've got kind of a unique background. I went into teaching in 1994, and I told the HR director that I'd be there for 5 years. And I just fell in love with teaching, and I just fell in love with Allegany College and the students. And so that's why I'm there. But I've worked at all these places over the years, and I can't say that I've disliked any jobs that I've done. If I had the opportunity to move back to any one of these places that are listed here, it would probably be New York City. I would love to live in New York City again. I just can't afford it, because you can't move from Allegany County anywhere. You don't have to edit that out, Jonathan. At the college, I chair our science division, and we've got some new programs started up here. And I do want to pass these out. I don't expect you to come to Allegany College, but I have to tell you also that we did have a student who was 74 years old, not that you're all old, but she took our courses for 2 years just to improve her knowledge base. She was from Washington, D.C. She moved up. She took 2 years of courses while she was here studying with us, taking insect and disease and pathology and urban forestry and botany courses. Her husband was at James Madison studying Japanese. And they got together on weekends to study together. So, but anyway, I have brochures and stuff. If you know of any students, anyone at your churches or through other volunteer activities or nieces or nephews that might be interested in taking courses that are probably 50% outdoors. We have a really good program with 100% job placement, and we have 2+2 agreements with lots of different schools, and we're probably the cheapest school in Maryland. So I just share that with you. Depends who you talk to. No. We're not part of this. We are a community college according to COMAR, but we are not part of the state system or the county system. We're kind of independent public. All the community colleges are. It's a political quagmire that's never been corrected. So Jonathan asked me to talk to you about these things. And I'm excited about doing this because this is baseline information that kind of needs to be understood at some level if you are managing your woods. So he specifically asked for these things, and I'm going to try and guide you through these. And I think you're going to go outside at some point and start playing around with this stuff. Some of you might even know what some of these concepts are. But before we get to that, wow, this is really cool. Before we get to these things, we've got to get the baseline information down. Trees grow in certain levels of sunlight. Did you cover that already, Jonathan? Cool. So I could skim it. Every tree will grow in full sunlight, but only some trees will grow in the shade. And if you get that concept down, and on a bigger picture, if you look at these species, it tells you something. How you manipulate the woods tells you what's going to come back. And if you're not sure how you're manipulating the woods, chances are shade-tolerant species are probably going to come back. And the big picture concept is red maple is going to come back. By default, the red maple comes back. So that's a big picture concept you have to get a handle on. The other thing are the size classes. Have you done that already? Okay. This becomes really, really critical because if you have shade-loving trees in the understory and beautiful oaks in the overstory, and you want to harvest those oaks, are you going to get oak back? No, you can't get oak back because those red maples that are already down here are going to keep the oaks from growing because the oaks need more sunlight. So that's another big picture concept. We'll go through a couple more examples later on in the presentation. But dominant trees are the trees that you've learned are the freest ones to grow. They're the ones that are able to suck up most of the sunlight, or I should say suck up most of the nutrients from the forest floor and absorb most of the sunlight. They have the opportunity to do even better. They have the opportunity to thrive. The co-dominant trees, they're happy, but they're not as happy as they could be, and they know it. Okay? And they just know it could be better. So based on whether a tree is a dominant or a co-dominant, and what we just talked about, what do you think is going to respond better if you were to thin the woods? A dominant tree that's already growing well, or a co-dominant tree that knows it can do better? Co-dominance. So if you're thinking about thinning your woods, you got to think about the co-dominance. It's like giving somebody a vitamin that really doesn't need a vitamin. That's what happens with a dominant tree. All right, now think about the dominant, the co-dominant, the suppressed trees, and a couple intermediate trees. Mix that, mash that up together with the crown classes. So we already got the concept down of the dominant trees not really responding to a thinning, the co-dominants needing the thinning. What happens with these guys here, depending on the species? So you've got stuff in the understory not in full sunlight, that are probably shade tolerant or intermediate species. Okay? So if they're in the understory or the midstory, and you thin out these woods a little bit, do you think these understory trees are really going to do well? Probably not, because they're already petering out. They're already doing poorly. Okay? It's hard to get a tree that's down low in the midstory or understory to respond to a thinning. The opportunity tree, the tree that is going to take over in that kind of a situation. Does this have a lighter too? I can't find it. There it is. Is this guy right there? Oh, wow, this is terrible. I've never used one of these before. Red maple. Red maple will just stay around there, tool around in the understory until it gets enough sunlight. And it gets enough sunlight, it's going to start growing. It's going to take over. So if you, if you cut out this codominant tree in the hopes of getting this dominant tree to grow better, it's not going to work. But this tree comes out, you create sunlight for these guys to grow, and if they happen to be red maples, that's going to make up your next stand at the expense of your oaks or your yellow poplar or whatever else you might have growing there that you want. Now, all right, the other part of the conversation we have to have has to do with what I think the first thing on the list is that Jonathan asked me to talk about, stocking. Stocking is a silly measurement. It makes almost no sense at all to a lay person. You agree? Did you agree? Yes. Yeah, it makes almost no sense to a lay person, and for most kids in college that are taking it for the first time, they don't know what you're talking about. The concept of stocking is based on two different quantifiable data sets. One is basal area and the other one is trees per acre. You need both of those to figure out stocking. When I was in college 30 years ago, 35 years ago, I was hoping this whole concept would go away. And it should go away because it doesn't exist in other parts of the world. They don't use this. Even out west, they hardly use this term anymore. But stocking is a function of taking a tree at 4.5 feet above the ground, taking the diameter of that tree, putting it in a trash compactor and making it a square. And then adding up the diameter of all the trees on an acre of land and putting that in one big trash compactor to get a square foot per acre. All right, so basically what this means is you got a whole bunch of round diameters of a tree. Area equals pi r squared. Convert that to a square unit. And then take all those square units and figure out what you got per acre. That's basal area. Most of the hardwoods in Maryland, Pennsylvania, West Virginia are hovering around 80 to 140 floor tiles per acre. 80 to 140. So a floor tile is about a square foot. All right, so that's what the average woods have. There are exceptions to that. The exceptions include trees that grow real tall and real straight. It's a whole different topic compared to a yellow poplar compared to like an oak. Yellow poplar grows tall and straight, and oak wants to branch out. So since they want to branch out, you can only fit so many square feet per acre. Whereas yellow poplar and black cherry, tall, straight, one stem, you could fit a lot more per acre. And pine, this is why everybody loves pine. You could fit a whole lot of square feet per acre. Okay? Yeah. Because everybody uses it. Yeah, and I'm just one guy at Allegany College producing 10 or 15 graduates a year. But there's other things that are fading in. They just haven't faded in yet. All the foresters. All the foresters. Foresters are a very conservative lot. And they've been brainwashed to think that they're right about everything. That's what education does. Yeah. Well, yeah, you want to talk about a funky monkey. Yeah. Yes, kind of. When you sell timber, you sell it in terms of the board feet per acre. There are 3 different scales that are used. There's an international rule, we're off tangent, Jonathan. International quarter inch, there's Scribner and a Doyle. They all have different rates. One is better for selling because it has more board feet. One is better for buying because it has less board feet. And yeah, international is the rule typically used around here. So the bottom line is if we understand this, we're in good shape. Square feet, just think in terms of tiles. You walk around in the woods, you see all these trees, you have so many square feet of tiles per acre. The other part of this is how many trees do you have on an acre? You need a number of tiles and the number of trees to figure out the stocking. And you would think it to be a real complicated thing, but it's not. You could measure the number of trees per acre, or you could let the computer do it for you. And most foresters now let the computer do it for them. And you guys have access to free computers or free software that will allow you to do that. All right, now, this is an old-fashioned graph. It's actually a 5-dimensional graph. And you can't see it. You have to eat mushrooms to understand how this graph works. You see how it's kind of sloped on the top and not sloped as much in the bottom? Well, I have to eat a lot of mushrooms to figure out that the graph is actually planed like this. So it's 5 different dimensions, and it actually flares out. You can't see that, really. But there's a lot of different things on this graph. This is called a stocking guide. Now, the way the stocking guide works is you plug in your trees per acre and your basal area, your tiles. And so let's say we have 300 trees per acre and 110 square feet of tile. So trees per acre is 300, and we zip that up to 110, we're right here. That tells us that we are overstocked. Okay? We are overstocked just a little bit because this is 100% stocking. All right? And anywhere in here is a fully stocked stand. Anywhere in here. So really you have room to thin your stand. And actually, anytime you're in a zone up here, you should have thinned your stand years ago because you've missed opportunities. Chances are most of your woods are overstocked unless they were cut improperly or cut haphazardly, not improperly. So here's, a bunch of different examples. 300 trees, you could have 150 trees. 150 trees and 110 square feet of basal area, put you up to here. You're still pretty highly stocked. Now here's a question for you guys to think about. Which stand has the largest trees? 150 at 110? Why? Yes. Yes. Absolutely. So this is all quantifiable. You've got a high basal area with the lowest number of trees. Here, as compared to this one, where you have the same basal area, but it takes twice as many trees to get that, right? Right? And then the other example here, with 300 trees per acre and 80 basal area. Now, there's another way you could look at this. Any of your diameters are shown up here, but it's a weird kind of diameter. This is not just like taking the mean median mode that you learned about in grammar school. This is something else that foresters have screwed up on forever. It's not an average diameter. It's something called the quadratic mean diameter. You got to use a quadratic equation to figure this stuff out. And if I did that in 1 minute, you'd be asleep. I'd be asleep. Okay, but you just have to understand that it equates to measuring trees based on the distance away from a plot center. It's like political statistics. Okay, we'll come back to that in a second. The next thing we got to look at is site quality, site index. Did you cover that, John? So you covered everything. Okay, good, good. So did you talk about it within the context of these types of things? So you're good to go. Bottom line of this, in terms of big picture concepts, the best soils for you are ones that are in the shade most of the day. Right? So you think of where the sun rises and the sun sets, so your northern exposure, your northern aspect, is not in the sun very long. Your southern aspect, your southwest in particular, tends to be the driest slopes. Driest slopes, the organic material is thinner, the invertebrate activity is lower, the mycorrhizan, the fungus, are on a drier site, so there's less of them. Your soil texture tends to be poorer, consequently. So in general, your better growing soils are soils that are on the northern aspect, they face the north, or on the eastern aspect. So think of ski slopes. Where are most of the ski slopes? On northern and eastern aspects. Where are most of our deserts? In the southwest. No correlation, but it's a way to remember that. Okay. So when we talk about site index, we talk about site quality in terms of tree heights. And the definition around here has to do with a base age of 50. Other places is very different than that. But in Maryland, what we're talking about is the average height of a dominant or codominant tree that's able to grow in the woods, and after 50 years, how tall is that tree going to be? Okay, so if we were working out, let's say in Oregon, we'd be using site index for a red alder tree on hardwoods with a 7-year base age. If we were working on eucalyptus in Central America, we'd be looking at like 11 years. Pine on the eastern shore, some places they're doing 25 years. But here we use 50. Now, basically what we're talking about is, let's not get too complicated here. We're looking at bad sites, average sites, and good sites. Which sites do you think you want to spend more time on managing for wildlife, production, for timber production, for just recreational activities? They tend to be the better sites. So this is where you want to put your time and effort into these things. Okay. Now, how site index is measured is you core a tree to figure out its age. There's cores over here that you've all taken looks at. You figure out the age of the trees. You figure out the age of the trees. There's a design flaw there. And based on the age of the tree, you measure the heights of the tree using the clinometer or an abney, or you just guess. You get the height of the tree. So let's say the tree is 80 feet tall at 70 years of age. Site index here is 70. Is that right? 80 feet tall. I'm sorry, about 60 years of age. 60 years of age. 80, 60. We're right in here. Site index is 70. The bottom line is these graphs exist for every tree species out there. If you know the age of your tree, and you can get the height of your tree, you can figure out using this curve, this series of curves, the site index. Don't worry too much about the numbers. You know, you're working in the woods with a chainsaw. You don't have to be that accurate. These are good quality sites. These are average sites. And these are dogs. Okay? You got good sites, bad sites, and average sites. That's it. So if you break it down into those three groups, you're good to go. Don't worry about it at 75, 77, 78. It's not that critical. All right, now, here is a good point to know. A site index determines the height of the tree. Site productivity determines the height of the tree. Site quality is important for the heights of the trees and how much biomass you can grow on an acre. Farmers know this. They're going to get so many bushels of corn per acre. Foresters, landowners, you're only going to get so many cords or tons of production per acre. You can't do anything to change the heights of the tree. The stocking is based on the diameters of the trees. Based on thinning the trees, you could make them thicker. All right? Thicker trees, the carbohydrates are reallocated. You can improve your yield by controlling the stocking. You can't change the heights of the tree. You don't thin trees to get them to grow taller. You thin trees to increase the yield. Yield in terms of the diameter. Okay, so that's almost like leveraging in the stock market, because it is a stock, it's a growing stock. So when we think of why we tend our woods, or why we might want to practice silviculture, we're thinking in terms of wildlife, economics, paying the taxes, recreation, but we realize we're increasing our yield. Whatever that yield is, money, wildlife, forest health, any of those concepts there. You're never going to do anything to change the biomass. You're never going to do anything to change the productivity of that soil unless you fertilize, and you're probably not going to fertilize. All right? And then you're going to get big stuff, you're going to get small stuff, stuff that's not really yieldable. Now, let's back up a second. Now that we understand site quality a little bit, and stocking a little bit, and this stocking guide. So our original stand was hovering somewhere around here. And our average quadratic mean diameter was a little bit shyer than 8. We choose to thin our stand to increase our yield. We know we are at about 100% stocking. When we thin our woods to increase our yield, we want to thin out the smaller stuff. So by default, we are going to increase our diameter of our stand. We're going to get the trees bigger just by doing the thinning. That's a good gig. So by thinning out, we know we're going to increase our diameter. I'll stand here a bit. I didn't realize I was standing in front of you guys over there. We're going to thin, small trees. We're going to bump it up. What we're saying to ourselves, by the end of this thinning, just the process of doing the thinning, we're increasing the diameter of the stand by about 1 inch. And we are going to thin it right down to here. So we're going to take out this many trees. We're going to take out 200 trees here. Is that 250? 250 to 150. We're going to take out about 100 trees per acre. And we are going to remove from 105 down to about 65. We're going to take out 30 tiles per acre. And hopefully we do that in a way that we're leaving codominants, because who cares about the dominants? They're not going to be thinned out. And we're going to take out smaller stuff, so we're probably going to take out our suppressed stuff or our intermediate trees. That makes sense? Okay, and then we're going to let those trees grow. And over the next couple of years, the diameter of those trees, since they're free to grow now, we're going to get better growth rates, better yield. The rings per inch are going to be further apart. So we're going to get those trees to go from 9 inches, maybe to about 11, between 11 and 12, somewhere right in here. And we say, wow, we're at 90% stocking. Let's thin again. And we go in there and we say, okay, we're going to thin again. By thinning, do we increase the diameter? Yeah, by default, the diameter is going up. And we decide we're going to thin down to here again. We're going to take out, we're down at 110 square feet. We're going down to about 80. So we're taking out about 30 square feet again. And we're taking our trees per acre down from this number here, which is about 125, to about 75. So we're cutting out about 50 trees. So that's the process of a crown selection thinning. That's the science behind how to use these stocking guides. And when a forester comes to your land and makes recommendations, they're bouncing your trees around here somewhere. Chances are, if you're on a northern or eastern slope, your woods are going to be sitting in here. If you are on a southern or western slope, your woods are going to be sitting in around here. If you're on a really, really lousy site, it's possible you're way down here. These are your dog stands. It's impossible to do anything with them. You either have to leave them and sell them for and enjoy them for other reasons like recreation, upland game habitat, sorry wildlife people, maybe putting in campsites or hunting stages or something like that. But it's going to take trees down here about 15 years just to get up in the green zone. And if you're willing to hold on to those lousy stocks, they'll eventually produce something for you. But just understand that they are lousy stocks. I got lousy stocks. Everybody's got lousy stocks. It's just part of your portfolio, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So, with silviculture, what you're trying to do is this. And you're not just doing it for timber production. You're doing it for, I don't know, esoterically, maybe carbon storage. Maybe you're trying to help in your own way prevent global warming by storing more CO2. Well, you're doing that by increasing the yield. Let's say you are producing more mast for turkey or for deer. Bigger trees will produce more mast. That's another option. For water quality and for water absorption through transpiration, those are all things that come into play. There's lots of different things you could increase your yield for. The big deal here is by increasing the growth rate of your trees, you're increasing your yield, you're managing your stocking, you're managing your dominant, codominant, intermediate, suppressed, and you're starting to pay attention to trees that are sun-loving, shade-loving, or in the middle. The goal of silviculture is bigger, better, faster, cheaper, and healthier for whatever your objective is. All right, now, I don't want to lose you, and I don't want you to fall asleep. But the next thing we got to talk about, and I hate this because this table shows you stuff in terms of timber. And I don't really like talking in terms of timber because it's not all about timber. It's not all about producing money for you. But we have to talk in terms of ages of trees. You got brushy fields where you get brambles and briars and all that kind of stuff coming up. Then you've got seedlings. Then they grow into saplings. Then they get bigger. And then they get bigger. Then they get bigger. Then they get bigger. So think of it in terms of berries, gnarly sticker bushes, things you don't really want to walk through. Okay? And then you make a decision that, well, maybe we're going to let it grow back naturally. Or maybe what we're going to do is plant in there. So we're going to talk about afforestation and reforestation. You might have to do some site prep to clean up your woods, to get rid of those brambles. You might have to disc everything. It depends on the site. Then after those trees grow for a while, you may have to release them. And if you're releasing trees, how many do you release? Well, there's 3 different types of release operations that foresters learn about. They're called cleanings, weedings, and liberations. And the simplest way to explain this is when you have trees coming up in the woods, you got a lot of them. Which ones do you want to save? Think about your carrots. You grow carrots. You got to pinch them off when they're really young because they're growing too close together. Nobody here grows carrots? Yeah. That's the same kind of thing. Same kind of concept, only a little bit different. Then you get into your pole size stuff. Hit pole size, then we start talking about thinnings, what I showed you on the stocking guides. We don't thin trees in the seedling stage. We don't thin trees in the sapling stage. We thin trees that are pole, small saw, medium saw, or large saw. You never thin trees in the sapling stage, and you never release in these stages here. Now, when I say never, there's always exceptions to the rule. There are some goofy new forestry practices that allow you to release, but this is the textbook version. In the younger stands, you do these release operations to make your woods better. And in your stands that are 6 to 10 inches, you start your thinnings. Some of the thinnings will pay. Some of them will not. Some of them you'll do yourself. Some of them you'll hire a logger to do. But since we live in a socialized country, the government is here to help. Yes, please do. Everybody, just interact. In younger stands, there are so many trees per acre that you don't know what you want. And the trees don't know whether they're going to end up being good trees or bad trees. So you end up releasing a lot more of them an acre than you need. You can do that, or you can say, hey, this is a real pretty looking black gum tree. I want this tree because I want the pretty flowers. And because that black gum tree is so pretty, this tree right next to it, the yellow poplar, I'm going to cut it out of the way. Or this one, I'm going to cut out of the way. So you might just take a chainsaw and cut the 3 or 4 trees right around it. So, yes. However, I've done release operations in Charles County where we were in Virginia pine and red maple stands. And the stands were so thick, the trees were like 2 feet apart. You couldn't even walk through it. We just took a bulldozer and drove roads up and down through the woods. And we'd clear like an 8-foot swath with the blade of the bulldozer, and we'd leave a 2-foot swath of trees. And then we'd cut another 8-foot swath. This way it would allow the trees to grow better. It looked horrible, just horrible. But now it looks good. Yeah. Then, well, I tell you. You get into thinnings, there's actually 5 official types of thinnings. And depending on where you're working, the one I showed you was the crown selection. That is the scientific one. That's the one that most foresters sell that are the hardest to understand. But it's the one that's most often used on managed land. The other 4 types, there's thinnings from above where you take out the bigger trees and leave in the other things. We don't really practice that here. There's thinnings from below where you take up stuff on the bottom to allow the mid-story to grow up to the overstory. There's free thinnings. which are just you walking out in the woods saying, I like that tree, I'm going to save it. I like that tree, I'm going to save it. And then you cut down a couple trees around it. And then there's geometric thinnings where you cut out maybe every other row of pine trees, or that bulldozer example I gave you. But the scientific one is the crown selection. Liberate is a release operation where you might have trees that are this tall, and you have, let's say, red oaks. Red oaks are here, and you might have red maples that are this tall. And they're a little bit over top your red oaks. And you know these red maples are going to take over, and these red oaks aren't going to make it. So what you end up doing is cutting out the red maples to liberate the red oaks. Yeah. It's a release. It's a type of release. And the other ones are weedings and cleanings. Cleanings, maybe you have diseased black cherry trees that are this tall, and you might have to cut out those black cherry trees. That's in the simplest form. That's how you could do that. Yeah. Ha. Yes and no. Yeah. If you're an artisan carpenter, you want tighter wood grain. But for you as a landowner selling your timber, it's not going to matter. It's not going to matter. So you don't have to worry about that. There is a lot of concern with pine and trees that are growing like 2 rings per inch. Because depending on how they're cut on the sawmill, they're going to bend one way or another way, and that's called juvenile wood, and it tends to warp a lot more. It was probably more dense, and it's probably more stable. Yeah. Older is always better, right? No, I'm serious. It's, yeah, because they were able to liquidate the timber to make your house. And they harvested something that was just free to grow for years and years. What year is your house? Doesn't matter. My wife inherited a house from 1835. Yeah, so we could say that, yeah, you say, wow, it's a dump. But the wood is really good in it. All right, the next thing you got to understand, and this becomes important if you are concerned about economics. Research has shown, this came out of New England, and for most of you that live east of Hagerstown, this would apply to you. It makes absolutely no economic sense to leave trees to grow bigger than 18 inches in diameter. Okay, this was produced by University of Massachusetts, about 7 or 8 other people. I don't know if you were in on it, Jonathan. Kittredge was the lead presenter. Economically, with the price of land as it is, it makes no economic sense to leave trees greater than 18 inches in diameter. You can do it for other reasons, and people do. But from an economic standpoint, 18 is maximum. One exception to that. Red oaks growing on real high quality sites, you can leave to 20 inches. So if you micromanage and day trade your stocks on a computer, this will become an interest to you. And you would want to consider this in how you manage your land as well. Good sites, good site quality, red oaks, 20 inches in diameter. Everything else 18 inches. Now, am I telling you to cut everything at 18 inches? No, because you're not only interested in money. If you were only interested in money, you wouldn't be here today or this weekend. You'd be out working somewhere else. You're interested in all the other intrinsic values that come with timber. So 18 inches, from a purely economic standpoint, is when you should sell your timber. The other thing that comes into play is the types of trees that we have in each of these categories down here based on their tolerant levels. Okay, so if you are managing black cherry or poplar or pines, these trees are shade intolerant. They need full sunlight to grow. they need full sunlight to regenerate also. Okay? We'll get to that in a second. As compared to sugar maple, if you have sugar maple stands and you want sugar maple to come back, if you expose those seedlings and seed in reserve, you might also get these guys back. So you have to start thinking, once your trees get to be 18 inches, what you want to do at the next step, how you want to manage these trees. Because I guarantee you, if this is all oak, and this is all non-oak, this is all maple and other shade-tolerant trees, you cut off this oak, you ain't getting it back. Most of Allegheny County, Maryland, most of Garrett County, where we've had these beautiful oak stands, and probably around here too, they're all being cut, and they're coming back as red maple. Okay? You're seeing similar things. I don't know, where are you from, Phil? Frederick County, you're probably seeing that as well. Anybody here from Southern Maryland? Southern Maryland, you probably got sweet gum and Virginia pine everywhere, right? Sorry? Sweet gum. And what you want is yellow poplar. A yellow poplar and sweet gum, they compete on the same sites for the same soils, the same nutrients, and it all depends on when you cut the trees what you're going to get back, and the moisture and that spring rainfall. So it's very precise in how you do this, rather than just saying, working with a logger and saying, I'm going to come take out the best stuff. You'll have stuff to grow. I'm just, yeah. Now, I don't often feel for wildlife values. Oh, young stand yellow poplar are really good if you like whippoorwill. No, well, yeah. No, interesting story though, and I think winter wren really like sweet gum, from what I understand, the seeds. Yeah, I remember having this conversation a while ago with a wildlife biologist. I said, sweet gum's good for nothing. He said, no, winter wrens really thrive on it. I never read anything else about it, but that's what he told me. Sweet gum, there used to be you remember those Italian ices with the wooden spoons? Yeah, you guys would understand this. My students have no concept. Well, there was a manufacturer of those spoons in St. Mary's County. And at that point, they bought all the sweet gum that they could get their hands on. But in, I guess it was the 1980s, they moved to Korea, and they closed down. So yeah, you have no market really for your sweet gum. Sorry. Sad story. Sad story. Okay, now, looking at this, now we're focusing on our overstory. All right, how much time do I have, Jonathan? 10 minutes. Okay, I could do that. Now we're focusing on our overstories. So far, we've just been talking about yield and bigger, better, faster, cheaper for whatever it is you want. We haven't talked at all about new seedlings coming up, except in that seedling stage. We've always been focusing on yield, diameter growth, ring growth. Now that we got these big trees that are around 18 inches in diameter, now we don't go in and cut. Now we think about how we're going to regenerate the forest. What methods we're going to use to regenerate stands. Some states in California and Oregon do a much better job of requiring certain types of regeneration. Maryland in that category. Most of the East Coast is not in this category. You can go to Canada, you go to Mexico, they do a better job than we do. You can go to the EU as well. But we don't usually think in terms of regeneration methods, because our economy in the last 25 years has evolved to microsecond thought processes. We don't think long term anymore. So that's the value of you guys. You're all thinking a little bit more long term. So we kind of talked about this. But basically, you have to think about what if you cut the best stuff out. That's the first step. Think about it. You got pretty trees in your woods. How do you cut the best stuff out? So there's the possibility that you've changed the gene pool. Okay, that's a valid concern for certain species, depending on how you plan to regenerate that stand. Good example of that, again, is the red oak, because those acorns have to fall to the forest floor and germinate before you cut out the overstory. All right? And now that gene pool only works for certain species. It doesn't, because others, like black cherry seed will stay viable in the soil for 70 or 80 years. So if you have a black cherry stand and you clear cut it, chances are it's going to come back black cherry. One of the best species we got out here, and you can manage it by accident. Really, it's a good, well, that's why we have such beautiful forests. They've all come back naturally by accident. Well, not by accident. Okay. 80% of the landowners on the East Coast do not manage with any sort of forestry advice. And you all being here, you provide the next generation of advice to your neighbors. You will do that. So only 20% of the trees that are cut are done with the assistance of some kind of a timber broker or forest manager or a forest technician or something along those lines. And this is the main reason why red maple is the #1 tree species in Maryland. Doesn't matter where you live in Maryland, red maple's coming back. Now, I love red maple just as much as the next person, but I think we got enough of it. Okay. Oh, what's next? All right. Where does the seed come from? We talked about this a bit with the oak, and we talked about it a bit with the black cherry. But you have certain ways that trees will regrow. Do you have stuff in the understory, like oak, since it's intermediate? If you did have the luck of having oaks grow back under a full overstory, and they're this high, that's called advanced regeneration. That's stuff you could use for the next stage. But if you don't have that, if maybe the deer came in and ate it all, or it just never happened on your site, what are you going to do to get the oak back? Yeah, it's 5 minutes. Oh, I thought you were asking a question. So seed can blow in. If you decide to harvest, you might get seed from an adjacent stand. You could have seed stored on the site. Two big picture concepts. You've got to start thinking about where that's all coming from. And some trees grow back from the stumps. It's called coppice regeneration. They'll grow back from the stumps, or they'll grow back from the roots, or they'll grow from branches hitting the forest floor. We don't see a whole lot of that here. It's called layering. You'll see that a lot with spruces. We do rely on stump sprouts. Stump sprouts are very, very viable alternatives for you as a landowner. So in terms of regeneration methods, and I think you all get a copy of this, but the only reason why we clear cut, I got to use this, the only reason why we clear cut is because we want to get back these types of trees. The trees are the most valuable types of trees. You think a forester wants to call for a clear cut? Oh, they don't look good. They cause controversy. We want to take the path of least resistance. We're just like everybody else. But if you want to get back a stand of yellow poplar or black cherry, that's what you got to do. If you're interested in getting your oak or white pine back, and if you live Montgomery County east to the bay, you'll want to get white pine back, I think, because there's a market for white pine. But white pine and red oak, in order to get those back, you have to practice something called a shelter wood harvest, where you leave enough trees in the that they're going to provide seed and shelter for those shade intermediate trees that need dappled sunlight. Okay. And then there's a whole lot of other types of options that we're not going to get into about individual tree selection, which is managing more like an old growth simulation. We always have some big trees and some small trees in the stand. These categories here tend to be great for wildlife habitat, upland game habitat, well, not so much upland game, but tropical migrants, forest interior dwelling species, and vertebrate management. They do really good here. Early successional forest, woodland game, turkey, quail, rough grouse. They tend to like these types of harvests, so you get that brushy young growth. Okay, so other things you got to consider there. So here's a regeneration cut, a clear cut after 6 years. Real thick. Time to get in there and release. This is a seed tree harvest. Seed tree harvests are done where you want these trees. You might leave 8 to 10 to 15 trees per acre with crowns that are nice and big, and they produce pine cones, and the pine cones produce seed. The seed falls to the forest floor, and you have a seed tree regeneration method. Then once you get your regeneration back, you can cut these guys out. Now, what's the problem with this? What happens if you have a windstorm? Another hurricane, a Florence or something. You've just left your best trees in the woods, and now they're all snapped off. You might be okay with that. All right. And then there's individual tree selection, where you'll go in and take out one tree, and you'll get sunlight hitting the forest floor all around it, and you'll get this sunlight that warms up the soil and allows sunlight to allow sun-loving trees to grow up in that little patch. That's another option too. The bigger you make the patch, the more sunlight gets to the interior. All right, so this is the summary conversation about regeneration methods. Based on the regeneration method, that's how you decide how you want to manage your final harvest. Okay? And these, I see you guys, I see a lot of you doing this, where you go in and you pull out a couple trees every now and then, and you make some money, but you're also doing things in a way that you can ensure that you're making the stand bigger, better, faster, cheaper, and creating better quality timber. This is how you're going to make most of your money, though. This is how, and I'm not saying this isn't sustainable. This is very sustainable as long as we have loggers around willing to do it. This can be done. But if you're looking at a more sensitive way of harvesting and maybe take less income, this would be the way to do it. All right. I don't think I'm going to cover the certification systems. Is that okay? Because it's only one slide. Any questions? Yeah. Well, red maple right now, the dollar value isn't so bad. So if you have it in your stand and it's at a size where you can manage it to increase the yield, the volume on that tree, keep it. But if it's smaller stuff, if it's smaller, consider trying to nurture some trees that might be around it, some oaks. Where did you say you lived? Right here? Red. Chestnut? Yeah, so try to release or thin and release those red oaks. Chestnut oak not so much, but the red oak over that. There are also, you can look at stumpage prices to figure out how much each is worth too. And that's out on the web. You could go to the Pennsylvania Timber Market Report. They'll give you kind of close prices. Do you guys still do timber reports? Yeah, so Pennsylvania would be the best, or West Virginia for Frederick. Something else? Yeah. Individual trees in the woods. In tall grass. So do you live in Frederick or Washington County? Southern Maryland cedar. They're very big. I don't know, not having seen them. Maybe you got a picture or something I could look at. But my thought is cedar, I mean, if you're looking to sell them, cedar posts for fence posts, if you like them, just let them grow. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but down from Southern Maryland, I don't know. You'll take them? Yeah. You got the sweet gum market cornered. Yeah, there are definitely benefits to having cedar, and my gut feeling is you don't have more than 1,000 of them. Yeah, so if you enjoy them, keep them. But from a timber value standpoint, probably not so much, unless you're able to sell them for fence posts. And there is a possibility of doing that. Yeah. I had a landowner I worked with in Swanton, Maryland, which is outside of Oakland. And he was doing a job for me, and he said, "What do you want to do with those locusts?" And I said, "Nothing, I just wish I could get them out of here." That was like an acre of locust. And they were about this big around, and he cut out probably 1,000 locust trees off 1 acre. And he said, "You want to know what I did with those locusts?" And I said, "Sure, what?" He said, "I took those locusts, I was able to get 2 logs out of them, 2 8-foot logs out of most of them, and I put them on the sawmill and I cut them into quarters, and I sold them to a horse farmer in southern Virginia for fence posts for $9 each. So out of 1 tree he got 9 times 8, $72 times 1,000, $7,200. I just gave it to him because I had no use for it. I didn't know that market existed. And the landowner was okay with it because he got the land freed up to grow other things. So, you know, it's a fuzzy science. I'll stick around. Yeah, I'll stick around as long as I can. I'm not looking for business. I have cards if you needed to call me. No, I'm serious. I am not looking for business. But if you want to talk about stuff or have another workshop or something, these things are here. I'm a lousy businessman.
I think maybe the impression you left as well